Hello everybody, Matt Bull here, MD of Action Coach in Loughborough, here with another episode of Business Spotlight, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Joe from the Athlete Place. How are you today, Joe?
Yeah, I'm all good. Yourself, mate?
Excellent, all good, all good, all good. Right, before we get started, why don't you just tell everybody a little about who you are and what you do?
Cool. Yeah. So my name's Joe. I've founded a company called the Athlete Place off the back of my own experiences in athletics. It's basically an online platform educating and providing guidance for athletics athletes and their parents. So we go on the basis that there's an athlete parent who's the number one supporter of their child, but they don't get enough support or any for themselves. And realizing that athletes need that support to navigate the ups and downs of sport and in life. But if their parents don't get the support for themselves, then they can't pass that on to their athletes. So for us, I've teamed up with my own mum, which is quite exciting, using my own experiences as a former GB athlete to kind of give back to the sport and to create something that was never there when I was growing up and needed it most.
Awesome. And how long have you been running the Athlete Place for now?
So I started the Athlete Place in 2020, August. So I stopped athletics in 2020, early January. And incidentally, I was in the shape of my life. I ran a PB in my last ever race, and then 2 weeks later, I quit the sport, which was a big call for me to make, given the ups and downs and the journey that I've been on. But I mean, it's all part of it, and just because you're in shape, you're running fast times, doesn't mean you're in a good place mentally. And for me, that kind of led to me to where I am now, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the disappointments that I've faced.
Yeah, awesome. So, question I always ask everybody at the start of these interviews is that success means a lot of different things to different people. From your perspective, when you think about a successful person, is there an individual that jumps to your mind?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, I wouldn't say one person as such. I think for me, success has a lot of meanings. And the one that stands out to me the most is doing something that is true to you and your purpose, but doing it well and enjoying the kind of process that goes with it. So for me, in my own experiences, you could have looked at me as an elite athlete and said, success means winning a medal or running this time or hitting this business target. But if you're doing something like that and the process is wearing you down, or you're not in a good position mentally, or there's other things, you haven't got that balance right, it doesn't mean anything. Because at the end of the day, you get to that end goal, and then what? I think for me, looking back at my sporting career and now linking that to my business career, it's that it doesn't matter what target you hit if you haven't enjoyed the journey or the process with it. So for me, that the answer to that question is anyone that's hit the targets that what they've set and they've actually loved the process. That to me means so much more than just simply hitting a target.
It's about having the right targets as well. I remember reading Johnny Wilkinson, rugby player, said won the 2003 World Cup. And she said within 15 minutes, it was like, it meant nothing.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I was actually, incidentally, I was talking about this same topic the other day with Katrina Johnson-Thompson, and how she won the world champs indoors and outdoors. And then after that, the next week, everyone's forgotten about that. You've got to turn up to training, and you've got to start winter training. You're back training in the snow. You're back doing weights, just like everyone else is.
Yeah.
And just because you've hit this high and you've hit this goal, that doesn't mean the journey's over. You've got to press reset and mentally and physically be able to come back to training or come back to work the next day and move on to the next target.
Yeah, it's that level of goal setting. Often, what we say is it's for business owners as well. It's about actually your identity and what the goals you're setting to inform the identity you want to be, as opposed to an extrinsic goal. Because you hit the extrinsic, and then guess what? As you say, a week later, it's kind of that's gone, and there, guess what? There you are, looking in the mirror, closing your eyes at night, trying to sleep. It's relevant across all boards, isn't it?
Yeah, that's spot on, mate.
Yeah, cool. So you've been in business now. How many years have you been running the Athlete Place for?
So I've started it just over 2 years ago, and well, just over 3 years ago, really. So I kind of broken it down into different phases of the Athlete Place. So I kind of started this as a bit like a passion project. And probably only until the back end of last year, December last year, that I've actually realized that this has got serious potential as a business. and trying to then commercialize it and to create something that I can actually do for a living, but something that I can actually then move on to impacting potentially millions of people. For when I started, it was really just a glorified blog for athletes to share their own stories and to help others going through mental health difficulties. And then later realizing that the parents play a huge role in that, but there was nothing out there. So then we implemented the parent support thing. And then it kind of comes to that typical fuzzy front end stage where you're trying so many different things. You've got so many different ideas and you're just throwing as much as you can at a wall and seeing what sticks. And really for us, that only started to stick at the end of last year. And now we are approaching a big launch for our new parent platform. We're building our contacts and our mailing list, and we're really starting to make a big start on the projects that are going to hopefully take this forward massively in terms of the business.
Cool. And what's the biggest lesson you think you've learned over the last 3 years as a business owner?
Oh, it has to be putting yourself out of your comfort zone. For me, I had absolutely no right to be starting my business. I was still a student. I was a quote failed athlete. I didn't have the kind of any business know-how apart from doing it at school. And then suddenly here I was sitting in meetings with CEOs of national governing bodies and Olympic athletes talking about kind of business proposals. And then for me, you just have no choice but to get used to it. So you hear the quote, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And then suddenly before you know it, the kind of where uncomfortable is comfortable in 6 months' time, then that moves again, and you keep moving those goalposts until whatever you're doing, you feel pretty normal doing. So for me, it has to be just putting yourself out of your comfort zone. The more you do that, the more kind of familiar you get with that feeling, and the more you're pushing yourself, and you don't know what's on the other side of the door. Very cool,
very cool. And from a looking ahead perspective, I mean, you've got a rapidly growing business here. So I'll often say to people, what does 5 years look like? For you, it could be like, what does this year look like? So I bet there's a lot happening for you this year. How far ahead are you looking at the moment with the business?
I think, to be honest, we've got the short-term goals in place. So for us, that's launching this platform, getting the user feedback and the testing all in place. Then using that feedback and using those numbers to then growing our kind of commercial partners. That's looking to work with more governing bodies. We're currently partnered with England Athletics already, and then we could look to scale that into the other governing bodies. Then we're also hoping to look into the independent schools that focus on sport. We think there's a huge gap in that market where we're giving additional value to parents of athletes who are those schools' number one stakeholders. But then also looking to build our presence in the sport of athletics. So for us, being known to as many athletes as possible is going to help us to reach more parents, but also to create more revenue streams from an athlete and a content side of view, but then also using that credibility to develop further kind of partnerships with athletes. If that's building our ambassador program, which we get a big name athlete to represent us and what we're doing because they love it and care about it and can relate to it, which will then lead to creating that same kind of thing, but with more elite athletes and more Olympians, so that in an ideal world, in 3 years' time, whenever a new person starts out in the sport, athletics, whether that's an athlete or a parent, they instantly know to go to the athlete place to get support and guidance that's going to help make their journey in the sport far easier, which will also improve their performance and hopefully keep them in the sport for longer as well.
Amazing. So that's the business growth aspirations. How do you see yourself having to grow to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like I said earlier, it's just showing up. The more you show up, the more you put yourself out of your comfort zone, the more you're going to learn, and the more you're going to become familiar with the kind of roles that you have to do. Another lesson that kind of links back to your old question there is that you have to be comfortable with outsourcing things. And for me, I need to not be the bottleneck of a business that most people tend to be when they own the business. You have to feel comfortable outsourcing stuff to other people that are better than you. You have to feel comfortable letting go of the things that you enjoy doing if someone is better than you at it. And for me, it's about kind of growing that, letting go of the things that I perhaps spend too much time on now, or just kind of doing more stuff that's working on the business rather than in the business. I think there's a real difference in those kinds of things.
Very good. What have you learned about yourself on the journey?
Oh, that's a great question. What haven't I learned about myself, to be honest? I think, to be honest, it's just backing yourself, isn't it? It's having that confidence that for me as an athlete, you have to have anyway. And for me, being involved in sport to such a high level and now being in business and hopefully reaching a high level in that, whatever that may be, there's so many transferable kind of skill sets and characteristics that happen between elite athletics or sport and elite business. And if you can kind of apply those across that, then that's going to make, well, it's going to make it a lot easier to hit the targets you set, but you're actually gonna grow as a person as well. So for me, I think, to be honest, it's just finding that thing that's going to give me as much purpose as possible and just keeping hitting it and nailing it so that becomes part of who I am, so that I can do something that I feel completely passionate about and I feel it's so rewarding that I don't want to not do it. Because for me, starting this project off the back of my own experiences makes me want to really help those people that I see in me and younger people that are going to undoubtedly be at the same position I was 2-3 years ago.
Awesome. So final question I always ask everybody is, you've been in business, now you say 3 years. What advice would you give Joe 3 years ago? So Joe starting out 3 years ago, back at the start, knowing Joe now, what advice would you give? What would you give Joe 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's such a difficult one. I love that question because you can answer it in so many different ways. But for me, it's just just what is it? It's just do things more, do things quicker, fail. Well, it's actually how do I say this? It's fail faster. It's fail faster. For me, there's been so many things, like I said there at the back end of last year, we're just throwing stuff at a wall, and you have to throw stuff at a wall to know what's going to go down well. So my answer to that question is definitely fail faster, but actually use those fails as lessons, because when you're losing, just like in sport, you can take far more from something that's gone badly than something that's gone well.
Amazing. Joe, absolute pleasure to have you on the Business Spotlight. Wish you all the success moving forward with what is no doubt going to be an extremely successful business. And we look forward to seeing all of our viewers on the next episode of the Business Spotlight. Thanks again, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.